Alrighty, so I'm cutting a little bit short when it comes to doing the preview for the Saturday night action because I had some errands to run this morning and thus I wasn't able to do this preview until now. But we still got about 2 hours before the busy action of the Saturday night is going to begin. And also, I just realized that my laptop is about to run out of battery, so let me just quickly charge that. Um, so that make sure that this laptop doesn't run out of battery in the middle of the video. That wouldn't be good, that is. But yeah, in terms of the action that we're gonna get this match week in terms of this weekend, it's pretty much the same as what we get in the midweek action. We're gonna have 14 games that's gonna be happening between the window of 7:30 p.m. Eastern all the way to midnight 30 a.m. Eastern time, and there are definitely some very marquee games that we're gonna see, including we're gonna have El Trafico this week as well. But we start off with the 7:30 p.m. Eastern window. There's going to be 5 games in that window, and it's actually pretty well balanced. It's going to be 5 during this window, 5 during the 8:30 p.m. Eastern window, and then there's going to be 4 that's going to be taking place in the late West Coast time window. Though I said it's very balanced, but there's going to be a stretch where we're going to have 10 games that's going to happen at the same time. So when that happens, it's time to ground hop. Now, the first one, we got the New York Red Bulls versus Inter Miami. So the Red Bulls 9-6-8, whereas Miami is 11-5-4 in terms of the all-time meetings, 6-0-5 in favor of the New York Red Bulls. The Red Bulls, of course, fresh off of that big come from behind win that they had against New England, where they score 5 on answer at 1 point to eventually win 5-3. Miami did come off of a rare loss that they had against Cincinnati, and yeah, this is not going to be easy going to the Red Bulls, a place where the last time when they faced against the Red Bulls, it was not a fun time for Inter Miami players and fans want to remember. I mean, they lost 4-0 in that game. Now, granted, that was a game where Messi didn't play, and it was on a very soggy uh, early season in the Jersey springtime. But still, I mean that is a game that Miami fans would definitely not want to remember, and they're definitely looking to get some revenge, and especially looking to bounce back after that tough performance against FC Cincinnati. I thought they were outplayed in that game against Cincinnati, something that we usually don't say about Miami very often. But yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can bounce back against a Red Bull side that, yeah, this is not going to be an easy game whatsoever. Probably one of the tougher games that they're going to have to play at home in this one. And then moving on, we got New England versus Orlando City. So should I say this is a desperation derby? Because I mean, both of these teams are desperately needing a win. I mean, for New England, it's just been an absolute tailspin. And in the game against the Red Bulls, it looked promising in the first half, and then yeah, the second half happened. Whereas Orlando City, they also are had a bit of a meltdown themselves in the middle of the week. In fact, I don't know which meltdown is worse in terms of both of these teams. Is it New England giving up those 2 goals in quick succession to quickly turn the game on its head, or Orlando City were well in control of the game only to concede 2 late goals in the last 5 minutes to lose that one against NYCFC? But nevertheless, all-time meeting 8-6 in favor of the New England Revolution. And like I said, whenever there's a desperation derby, both of these teams desperately need a win, and we'll see whether or not who, of course, will get that to get themselves back on track. Moving on, we got Montreal versus the Chicago Fire. So, for the Fire, it was a pretty certified Fire moment in terms of what happened in the middle of the week, dropping points in that game when, just like Orlando City, they were on point of getting all 3 points, and now their record is 8-5-9, and they're actually below the red line as we speak. Montreal has a 3-6-14 record in terms of the all-time meeting, 13-8-9 in favor of Montreal. And Montreal has been playing team tough lately. Yes, they're not getting the result, and yes, the points doesn't shows that. But when you look at the past couple of games that they played, they have definitely put up the effort, and I think that's all you can ask for this Montreal side that is in the midst of just kind of tearing things down again. I mean, they sold off a lot of key pieces for a good amount of money. And usually you like to see when teams does that, but then you also got to remember who, of course, owns this team that is. But no doubt that for the Fire, this is not going to be an easy game against a Montreal team that, like I said, a lot of teams in the bottom of the standings, especially around this time of the year, you might think that it's easy for these top teams to beat some of these bottom feeder, but it could be hardly from the truth. I talked about before where a lot of these bottom feeders, especially in the Eastern Conference, they play team tough in terms of how we have seen in these past couple of games. So Chicago should not be taking Montreal lightly in this one. Montreal has the ability to cause a big upset or two, and they're definitely looking to try to do so and get their second win of the season at home in this one against the Fire. Speaking of which, we got Columbus versus DC United, and again for Columbus, they got to be wary of this game as well. DC actually feels like Montreal has played relatively well. Now, obviously, the resort hasn't really quite showed, but they have definitely showed the effort in the last couple of games. But they do have a 4-7-12 record, whereas Columbus is 11-8-4, all time meaning 17-7-10 in favor of the Columbus Crew. And on paper, it looked like this is a complete mismatch. Columbus should easily win this one, but I wonder how Columbus will respond after in the game against Nashville, they just weren't at it in that game. I mean, yes, they created the chances in this one. They outshot Nashville in that one, but they weren't really putting a lot of dangerous chances. And in many ways, they kind of were being out. That was one of the rare time we see Wilfred Nancy kind of got out coached by his opposition, and I thought BG Callahan definitely out coached Wilfred Nancy in that game as well. So we'll see whether or not if they can get the response in this one. Most likely they will. I mean, Columbus has been pretty good when it comes to facing against teams that they should be able to beat. And I expect that of course is the case again. Though don't be surprised if DC might give Columbus a little bit of a tough time. They have definitely given opposition a little bit of a tough time in the last couple of games, and that's kind of all you can ask for a DC team that is already looking forward to next season. And then last but not least, we got Atlanta versus Charlotte FC to wrap up the 7:30 p.m. Eastern start. Now, normally when both of these teams play against each other, usually you see a game in the matinee window or it's a standalone game. It's kind of surprised that this is not the case, but nevertheless, Atlanta it has a 4-8-10 record. It's been a miserable season for this Atlanta side. The only positive is that they of course got a late stoppage time equalizer in the last game as well from one of their homegrown. Whereas for Charlotte FC, it feels like they are definitely steering the ship back in the right direction. And part of that is because, they are playing against relatively easy opponents, especially at home. But now this is going to be a big test because the role form this season for Dean Smith's side has not been great whatsoever. And again, Atlanta is a team that, they're hanging in there in terms of trying to get something going. They're definitely not going to be a team that will be just a walkover for Charlotte to do. But Charlotte does have a 10-2-11 record, and in terms of the all-time meeting, 4-0-3 in favor of Charlotte FC. I remember when this game used to be a marquee kind of matchup between these two southeastern teams that kind of lost a little bit of the luster because both of these teams. Well, one team has been having a season that's been a bit of a roller coaster. It started well, just completely fell off the map and now started to slowly regain its form. And then one teams that have just completely underachieved throughout the entire part of this season. Now, moving on to the 8:30 p.m. Eastern window, we get 5 games as well in the 8:30 p.m. Eastern window. Starting off with Seattle versus the San Jose Earthquakes. So the Sounders 9-7-6, whereas the Quakes is 7-8-8. In terms of the all-time meeting, the Quakes actually now once again leads the all-time meeting. I remember when the all-time meeting was heavily favored the Seattle Sounders, and I mentioned it's quite crazy to see whenever both of these teams meet each other. How I remember a couple of years ago, I just hate the Seattle Sounders as a Quakes fan because of the way that they always tends to beat it. Now it's kind of the opposite. I mean, these last 3 or 4 years, it's been Sounders fans that probably hate playing against the San Jose Earthquakes because they just cannot beat the San Jose Earthquakes. It's been a while since Seattle has beat the Quakes in the matchup, and especially coming off of that 3-0 blown lead that they had to draw against Colorado, which absolutely felt like a loss in that game against the Rapids. We'll see whether or not if they can bounce back against a team that has kind of been their bogey team, a team that has kind of had their number. And the same I would say about the Quakes, where it's been a miserable last couple of games for the Quakes, and this feels a little bit like last season again, where last season we had a pivotal game I think against the Portland Timbers where they lost, where that game was pivotal because they kind of got robbed in terms of some of the questionable refereeing decision. But nevertheless, I mean that was again the Quakes lost that one, and then they just went on a tailspin after that. I'm just hoping that's not going to be the same case in this one. I'm hoping eventually they get something and maybe get a win coming out of this one because again, this is a team that they have had their number recently and have played relatively well. Which again, that's it's still crazy to say that that is the case. Consider about a couple of years ago, that was definitely not the case. It's been almost a complete 180 in terms of how the dominance has been between whenever both of these teams meet against each other head to head. Now, moving on, we got Nashville versus Toronto FC. So Nashville have a 13-5 record and continue to be one of the hottest team in the league right now. I mean, they have pretty much in the last 16 games they've only lost once, and that was against Inter Miami, and then they made another statement win in the last game against the Columbus Crew. Now they face against a TFC side that, yeah, again, one thing I will say about this TFC side is that this is probably the team you do not want to face that is below the red line right now, and looking to trying to continue a good run of form because Robin Fraser, whatever he has done to this Toronto side, he has really put up a defensive masterclass to this team. I mean, this team has been tough as hell to play in the last couple of games. This team has given nightmares to even some of the best team in the league. I mean, they kept San Diego in check in the last game. San Diego has the most explosive attack in the league, and yet this TFC side was able to keep them in check. And we'll see whether or not if they'll do the same thing against Nashville. If they can do so, I mean, that would be even more impressive. I mean, I will say that some people say, does Toronto still have a chance to make the playoffs? No, I don't think so. I think they dug themselves way too much deep in a hole to begin with, and we knew that this team was not going to make the playoffs. The fact that they are being competitive, and especially really play making the opposition uncomfortable, and not to mention now they're starting getting resort against a team that they have no business of winning. Again, this I would not be surprised if Toronto can go into Nashville and get a resort. This has been a very resilient side, it's it shouldn't be no surprise to see that ever since the two Italian left this team, Toronto has done very well ever since those two Italians finally moved on from this team. But moving on, in the next match, we got a couple of interconference matchups, starting with Sporting KC versus NYCFC. So NYCFC got the win in the last game, a dramatic come from behind win against Orlando City. So that means they're going to lose this game, right? I mean, that's just kind of how the pattern it's been this season. It's been win, lose, and sometimes with a couple of draw. Now they're facing against a Sporting KC side that is 6-5-11, and just as you thought, Sporting KC were in it when it comes to the playoff race, and we're looking to do some good things. They did suffer the loss against Seattle. That was a bit of a major setback. I mean, they're still within in distance, but it's kind of getting to that part where they need to get more points and maybe get on a little bit of a winning streak or unbeaten run to really truly consider themselves a playoff contender. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 3-1-2 in favor of NYCFC. And like I said, for NYCFC, I'm gonna watch to see whether if the narrative continues because again, this team it's been the most confusing MLS team to figure out. It's been the most inconsistent MLS team so far this season. For whatever reason, whenever they win a game, they're due for a loss because that's just how the pattern has been for this NYCFC side, really for the past 2 or 3 months now. Now, moving on, we got the Houston Dynamo versus the Philadelphia Union. So on paper, this interconference matchup, it looks like a lopsided matchup. I mean, the Houston Dynamo, besides that one good win that they had against San Diego a couple of weeks ago, I mean, this has been just a really bad run of form that Ben Olsen's side has found themselves in. They're going the wrong direction, just like what we saw in the beginning of the season, and they're facing against a Union side that is at the top of the Eastern Conference, albeit, the last couple of games they haven't really won convincingly and they at times have played down to their competition a little bit, but still, they do have a 14-4-5 record. And in terms of the all-time meeting, the Dynamo actually leads the all-time meeting 9-4-7 in favor of them. But on paper, you would expect the Union should take care of business in this game. They definitely have more of the quality. And in terms of the form itself, the Union is definitely better compared to what we see with the Houston Dynamo this season. It is hard to believe I'm saying this, but this season they have had their issue playing at home. I mean, this has been for years has always been one of the toughest team to play at home, especially with the humid air that isn't in the Houston area around this time. But this season, it's just been the complete opposite. They just simply cannot win home games, and that's kind of the big reason why. I mean, they're still with it. They are definitely still there when it comes to the playoff race. But you can imagine if they were able to win those home games as well. How much that would that make a difference in terms of them really are in the midst of this playoff race and not of course be where they are right now, which is still looking on the outside side in the playoff race. Now, moving on, we got FC Dallas versus St. Louis City. So this is again another battle of the mid between both teams that, I mean, St. Louis had started to turn the corner a little bit, but you can't say the same about Dallas. They're still in this winless run. The good news is they finally did stop the bleeding in terms of the last game where they finally ended that losing streak. Had they lost against the Quakes, that would have been the longest losing streak that FC Dallas have ever had in their franchise history. But still, they have a 5-7-10 record. St. Louis have a 4-6-12 record. In terms of the all-time meeting, 2-1-2 is the all-time meeting. And whenever you have like a battle of the mid and a matchup between two teams that probably are not going to make the playoffs this season, I mean, you just hope that it's going to be a good game and not a relatively boring game. I mean, I've seen before where it can go both ways, where it could be a boring 0-0 draw, or the fact that it could be an entertaining game. We'll see how this, of course, will turn out between these two teams that are maybe just kind of playing the string out for the rest of the season. Now we get into the late West Coast game, and this is where we start to get some more excitement. That is, and start off with RSL versus FC Cincinnati. So of all the big matchup that we're gonna get this week, I feel like this is the most underrated one because RSL, they have been in incredible form in the last couple of games. Their unbeaten run that they've been on in the last couple of games has single-handedly not only saved their season, but now are really right there in terms of the playoff spot. I think they're only a couple of points behind the Quakes. The Quakes are actually still above the red line. So remember I said that the Quakes are below the red line in the middle of the week after that draw against Dallas? That's actually not true. They're still above the red line, but they're just clinging on. And now an RSO is definitely coming with an 8-4-10 record. Now, they do have probably the toughest home game that they're going to have to face this season against FC Cincinnati. We know how good FC Cincinnati is when they're on the road this season. It's been one of the best road team this season with a 14-3-6 record as this game starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. In terms of the all-time meeting, there's only two other meetings between both of these teams. Both of these teams were able to get a win in the prior two meetings. But yeah, like I said, this is a very underrated matchup. Not a lot of people would see this as a marquee matchup, but considering the fact that Cincinnati has been so good on the road this season and they're coming off a big win that they had against Inter Miami, especially outplaying a Messi and friendly Inter Miami team at home, they're gonna definitely have all the momentum heading into this game against an RSL side that all of a sudden they're starting to find the formula of winning again. Even though if they're not scoring a lot of goals and not playing the most prettiest soccer under Pablo Mastroeni, the fact that they're getting the resort is all that matters for a team that is really now in the race of trying to make it into the playoffs. Now, moving on into the free 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. And honestly, I hate the fact that this matchup between the top two teams between San Diego and Vancouver is at the same time as El Trafico because I'm pretty sure everybody is going to tune in to El Trafico because, it is El Trafico. It is the best rivalry in MLS according to the media nowadays. And people forget that besides that, we also have a top two battle in the Western Conference at the same time. Now, the good news is, at least this time, there is going to be a matchup between two teams that are going to play their strongest squad. Last time when both of these teams played against each other in Vancouver, we don't really kind of had that marquee kind of feeling because neither of these teams were playing their strongest team. They were missing guys due to international duty. But this time we have the luxury of both teams get a full squad going, and we'll see whether or not this might be a preview of the Western Conference final. No, that is. I mean, I know at any time when it's like a first and second place matchup, you would always say that's kind of like a preview of the Western Conference final. But at the same time, I would also say that yeah, that it doesn't always work out like that. But San Diego with a 13-3-7 record, whereas Vancouver has a 12-5-5 record. San Diego, of course, won the first meeting between both of these teams, and what a first meeting that was! That was an absolute barn burner kind of matchup that we saw in Vancouver. That is now the bad news for San Diego coming into this one is that they're not going to have Milan Ilaski in this one. Ilaski, of course, in that game scored 4 goals against Vancouver. Obviously, he's got loaned back to Denmark. So yeah, that it will be interesting to see how the attack is going to get and how big of a loss this would be. And for the Whitecaps, again, that 3-0 win against the Houston Dynamo, I'm pretty sure they definitely silence a little bit of a doubters. The fact that maybe the Cinderella story has turned midnight for this Vancouver team. They're still in a relatively good form, and they're looking to try to continue that for the rest of the season. Now, moving on, we got the Portland Timbers and Minnesota. So the Timbers 9-6-7, whereas Minnesota is 11-7-5. And again, anytime when you're going head to head with Trafico, yeah, it kind of sucks that that is the case. But I'll still tune into this one because it is my team after all. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 10-2-5 in favor of Minnesota. Minnesota has had their own against the Portland Timbers. Though I say that, but last time when both of these teams play against each other. The Timbers actually won the meeting against Minnesota at Providence Park. So yeah, with the way that also the fact that the Timbers have been in a really bad run of form lately, they have lost 3 of their 4 games since coming out of the Club World Cup and Gold Cup break. And Minnesota, last game was one of those kind of game where they just simply don't like to have or simply had too much possession and couldn't do anything to try to break down this LAFC side. We'll see whether or not they can bounce back in this one. It also doesn't help the fact that I don't know if this matchup kind of favorites Minnesota either. The Timbers is kind of a team that doesn't usually like to have possession either. They like to go on the counter attack as well, but because of the fact that Minnesota is a road team, and I mentioned before that this is one of the best road team in the league, and it's no surprise because the style that they play fits perfectly of what road teams usually do in MLS. This should be a very fascinating battle between these two teams. And then last but not least is none other than El Trafico. So LALA once again this week LAFC take on the Galaxy. LAFC has been in relatively hot form lately with a 10-5-5 record, whereas the Galaxy, you can't say the same thing about it. But again, whenever it's El Trafico, it's almost a coin toss at times in terms of how the quality is going to be. Now, the all-time meeting 10-6-9 in favor of the Galaxy. The Galaxy still have a slight edge in terms of the all-time meeting. And again, I know people will say that LAFC is going to absolutely steamroll the Galaxy in this one. One thing I will say about El Trafico, when you look at the history of this rivalry, there's only one game I can recall that really was the case where one team actually bolt raced the other team in and out Trafico, and that was in the MLS's back tournament when LAFC was able to win 6-2 against the Galaxy. But keep in mind that was a game that was playing in front of no fans and basically playing in the ESPN Wild Worlds of Sports. That was just such a weird time in MLS, but also a very interesting time in MLS that I will never forget. It's kind of a once in a lifetime kind of thing that happened in that play. But besides that, I mean, when it's been playing with fans, there's been some barn burner kind of matchup. There's been some really dramatic kind of matchup throughout this rivalry, and I won't be surprised that it might be the case once again in this one. Again, I know no for the Galaxy, their season is pretty much done. They pretty much have no shot in terms of making the playoffs, but they're gonna treat this as their MLS Cup. They would love nothing to not only win this game, but most importantly, win the series as well. And once again, gets to rub it into their intercity rival face that, well, yeah, you might have a relatively good season, but you still did not win the series, and you didn't even win a game against one of the worst Galaxy team in recent memory. So yeah, very fascinated to see how this game is going to be. Very fascinated to see the latest chapter of El Trafico that is about to happen later tonight. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview of all 14 of these games. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of this preview, and then let me know in the comments below your prediction for all these games as well. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.